Well, good day to you. It is the 8th of March, 2025, and I hope you're having a great day wherever you are. My name is Gary Willing. I want to welcome you to Search for Signs if you're new and welcome you back if you've heard these videos before. But whether you're new or you've heard these videos before, if you want to know more about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, if you think this information might be of interest to you and you want to know more, you want some background information perhaps, or you want to see if there's any truth to this information, whatever the case may be, might I suggest checking out some of the free information on some of the websites that I provided links for in the description portion of these videos, such as the Share International site. Link is at the very top. You can get the best background information there than you can anywhere else. You want to come back and join the discussion? Listen to another video and don't comment, don't ask a question, doesn't matter. As long as it leaves you with a little bit of hope, I will be very happy with the result. But if you want to ask a question, want to let me know what you think, post a comment, ask your question by posting your question in the comment section, or email me that question to searchforsigns@mail.com. Okie dokie. Now, this is kind of a convoluted comment. Not the comment itself, but I just need to kind of set it up. This person's commenting about a video where I was addressing a comment of somebody named Ray who said something to the effect of, only a slave would refer to somebody as a master. Of course, when I refer to these masters, I'm not referring to anybody being a slave or them coming to enslave humanity or whatever. But this person, commented as well, joined the discussion and said, the term master is regularly used having nothing to do with enslavement. Bach is often referred to as a master composer. He was. Rembrandt or Matisse referred to as master painters. They are. And so with spiritual masters, they are masters in consciousness and neither wish nor seek to enslave anyone. And that is very true. In fact, they're here to do the exact opposite of enslaving anyone. They're here to free us from really what is enslaving humanity, our own fear and our own conditioning. Perhaps free us from the tyranny of the institutions and the structures that enslave humanity, such as our economic structures, our political structures, our religious structures. And help us build structures that support humanity and free humanity and sustain humanity and not enslave it, right? But to add a funny little point to that, I like to grill, so you could call me a grill master, right? Well, I'm not a grill master. I'm just a grill neophyte. You know why I say that? I'm not a master yet. And that is because I have not mastered how to grill a pizza in my Kamado grill. So that is the only reason why I got a Kamado grill to begin with, was to learn how to cook a pizza on it, because I love brick oven pizzas. But I've gotten close, still working at it, but haven't mastered it yet. But when I become a grill master, it doesn't mean I'm going to have a bunch of slaves running around. It just means that I will say that I know how to cook on a grill. But thank you very much for the comment, Mark. I really do appreciate it. Now, Ms. Ruby, you had a couple comments I wanted to talk about. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Ms. Ruby. Hopefully I didn't startle you with that. First one, you said, moths are attracted to the false light, butterflies are not. That is such a beautiful comment. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this is not necessarily just about the comment, but it has to do with moths. And what do moths have to do with this story? Well, I had a personal experience with one of these masters, not Maitreya this time. It was the Master Jesus. The master who was Jesus in Palestine is now one of the masters of wisdom, who is still here helping and guiding humanity and will eventually be outknown for who he is as the Master Jesus, just as Maitreya will be known for who he is. Now, in this instance, and I have to set this up, this is stemming from the fact that when I was a kid, I loved to squash bugs. That was like my thing. I was always outside playing in the yard or playing in the woods or whatever, and anytime I came across an insect, if it got in my way, well, it didn't live long, right? So my dad even jokingly referred to me as the Mad Masher. Not something I'm proud of, but it's something that I did. I probably have a lot of karma to burn off. Insects probably don't like me. They probably sense the fact that I have done that in my life. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I've burned off all that karma. I don't know. But what happened was, the second part of this story is not the master experience, but when I started taking guitar lessons from this person named Robert, who was a wonderful guitar player, but also an even more wonderful person and a very loving person. And I really learned a lot about this information from him too. But on my first lesson with him, my first musical lesson, I don't even remember what we talked about. I just remember this one instance because it meant that much to me at the time. Was there was a moth flying around the room where he was teaching me, And he stopped and he put his guitar down and he walked over and gently grabbed this moth. He didn't kill it. And he rescued it and freed it. Opened the door and let it out. And I was blown away. I didn't realize anybody did this. It showed this kind of compassion toward bugs, right? I would have killed it, but that was just me. Now, the experience that was quite extraordinary was I was at a birthday party here in Atlanta at a friend's apartment, and last I checked, this boy at this time was probably about 5. Now he's probably in his mid-30s. That's how long ago this was. But in Jimmy's apartment, I had just gotten through eating the birthday cake. I remember, and I set the paper plate down on the floor, and I was still sitting on the couch, and I see this moth flying around. And I thought about this time that Robert Newton showed such compassion to a bug, right? So, and I don't go around thinking that I can communicate with anything telepathically, but for some reason I thought about this moth, and I thought to the moth, I said, if you want to get out, land somewhere where I can pick you up and I'll take you out. I promise you I won't kill you. I'll let you out. And this thing immediately flew and landed right on my knee. I was like, well, that's weird. So I did what I promised. I cupped it in my hands. I could feel the little, wings of the moth against my fingers, and I opened up the door and I freed it like I promised. And then as I was sitting down, a roach came out from underneath the couch and went right to my plate. Now, I had finished my food, but it was just right to my plate. Now, roaches typically were enemy number one when it came to insects in my life, right? I would normally just step on it and kill it. But I was trying to turn over a new leaf. I was trying to learn to be more compassionate. And I was like, okay, I guess I should be compassionate to roaches too, right at this time. And I took the plate and I opened up the door and I kind of flung it out. I didn't put it in my hand. I just kind of flicked it out. And I remember Jimmy, the father of this son at this birthday party, was like, what are you doing, Gary? And I'm like, don't worry about it, right? And then I threw the plate away and then I sat down again and a fly landed right on my knee, right where the moth had been. And I tried to shake it off and it wouldn't leave my knee. And I said the same thing. Okay, I guess you want to be rescued, right? So I cupped it in my hand. I know how many times can you cup a fly in your hand? They usually can get out pretty quickly, right? And I cupped it in my hand, opened the door, and I let it out. And I had just happened to mention this to Benjamin Creme some years after this. And I just mentioned this experience, not as I thought it was a master experience. He was talking about animals and one of the experiences he had with horses or something. And I mentioned this thing about these insects and where it came from and how I had originally squashed the bugs and I was trying to learn to be more compassionate and all that kind of stuff. And he said that the Master Jesus manifested those insects in order to teach me how to learn to be more compassionate toward others, even insects, right? And the one thing I wanted to say about this instance was these masters are omniscient. They know what's going on with everybody all the time. And they also never waste an opportunity to teach someone something if they can, if it will be received properly. We'll understand their wisdom and understand how they teach the more we see them out in our lives in the future, but they never waste an opportunity to teach somebody something. When the time is right, they will teach you. And this was an instance where the Master Jesus was trying to teach me how to be more loving, right? Now, unfortunately, since then, I have killed a few more bugs since then, but I always apologize about it and I always feel bad. Okay, but I'm not quite nearly as indiscriminate in terms of killing anything as I was before this experience. So I have learned something, I guess. But anyway, that was something I wanted to share with you guys based on your comment, Ms. Ruby. Now, the other comment I wanted to talk about, what I found to be a gem of a comment, believe it or not, was when you said Hebrews 12 speaks of the unshakable kingdom. And I looked it up, and I had never read this verse before, but I tell you, I think you stumbled across something quite extraordinary in the Bible. Now, the reason why she's bringing up Hebrews 12 is because in the last video, the video that she's commenting on, I had mentioned that according to the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, Hebrews 12:23 is the only time that the Masters of Wisdom were referenced directly. There might be other times where they were referenced indirectly, but that was the only time they were referenced directly. By saying, in the line it says, just men made perfect. And it's never been spoken about in any church I've been in. But if you read it, it's there. And so the times that people have commented on this channel saying, well, there's no reference to the Maitreya or these masters in the Bible, so there must not be any truth to this. Well, according to Alice Bailey, that's not entirely true. That verse, Hebrews 12:23, just man made perfect, is a direct reference to them. Now, what is Hebrews 12:28, which is what she's talking about? And Ms. Ruby, like you've suggested before, I actually Googled this, and I wanted to read what it says about the Bible and then Google's explanation of it, and then I want to talk about my explanation of what I really think they're talking about. So, the Bible verse that mentions an unshakable kingdom is Hebrews 12:28, which says, quote, therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom which cannot be shaken, unquote. Explanation. This is Google's explanation. The verse is part of a passage that encouraged believers to be thankful for the kingdom and to worship God with reverence and awe. The verse also suggests that believers should receive the gift of God's kingdom and be open to its grace. It goes on to say, the concept of an unshakable kingdom in the Bible represents the eternal kingdom of God, which is permanent and cannot be destroyed. This contrasts with the temporary nature of the physical world, which is subject to change and decay. The verse also suggests that believers should worship God with reverence and awe because God is a consuming fire. This means that believers should serve God with godly fear and in a way that pleases Him. Well, that is one way of interpreting what they're saying. Okay. Now, personally, I've never understood the whole God-fearing concept and belief that you should fear God. I don't think we should fear anything, especially something that's supposed to be known for its love. But that's just me. That's just my interpretation of and belief in that kind of thing. But my interpretation of what they're talking about in Hebrews 12:28, this unshakable kingdom, is the self. This is what Maitreya is here to teach us. He says he comes to teach humanity the art of self-realization. He also said he comes to rid the world of the crime of separation. He affirms that as his purpose, which are one and the same thing. But everything that he's going to be talking about, teaching humanity, is going to be centered around the self, the truth of what we really are. He refers to it as the self. He's also referred to it as the absolute. He's even gone on to say that the self alone matters. There's nothing else in all of cosmos that truly matters but the self. That's the truth of it. I think that's this unshakable kingdom. Okay, so let me explain. The self is this space that is allowing everything in cosmos to be created and to exist. We live and move and have our being in this space. This is what Paul was talking about, I think, when he said we live and move and have our being in God, right? God's not this man with a beard on a cloud somewhere far away that we can turn our backs to him so he doesn't see what we're doing. You know, God is what is allowing all this to exist, what's created all this. And really, there could never be a cosmos without the space to allow it to exist, the nothingness that allows it to exist. But any description of this self or absolute reality is just a description of it. It's just words. It's not the actual thing. It could be a hint into discovering for yourself what the self is, but it's never it in and of itself. So you could call it the unshakable kingdom, you can call it the absolute, you can call it the self, you can call it Mary Poppins as far as you're concerned. It doesn't matter what name you put to it. It's only a hint or a guide into how to find it. Now, the other way of explaining it is kind of how I see it, is this space that allows whatever to exist can't be subdivided. It can't be divided into anything. It can't be cut up. If you took a baseball bat and tried to swing at it, you're not doing anything to it other than just moving a bat through the space, right? The space is never affected by what we do to it. We could kick at it, punch at it, hit it, shoot it, cuss at it, doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt anything because it's permanent. It's there. My mom once asked this question when I was a kid to me to get me to think about it. Well, if, she believes in God and she believes in the Christian God, but if God created the universe the way that he did, whether it's as the Christians believe in the Bible, right? Or as scientists are trying to prove with perhaps the Big Bang, right? Both sides don't have the actual information because we weren't there, right? But what was there before? This is the question. What was there before all this existed? That is the nothingness. That is the self. That is what is here, will be here as long as consciousness and and the cosmos is manifested and will be here long after this consciousness and this cosmos go back into itself. Maitreya's New Age prayer that he's given to the world, it starts with, I am the father and mother of the universe. I am the creator of the universe. I'm the father and mother of the universe, excuse me. Everything came from me, everything shall return to me. But it's not the little you, it's the self that he's talking about. And it's about identifying with that self. These masters identify with that self totally unmovable in that way. There's nothing in that could come up their way that would shake them from that reality. But it's a distinction, like riding a bike, You can't read in a book how to ride a bike. You have to actually try it. The trying of self-realization is following the not the rules that Maitreya has laid down, but the honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. Those aren't rules. These are just guidelines. These are just hints and suggestions on how to find it. But once you realize yourself as the self, even if it's just momentary, you never really see life the same way again, because you've now seen how it really is. And you might go back into your ways of doing things, but you can't go back fully till you've changed. And then the natural step is to try to find it again, and then try to do it again, and try to do it again. And that's what these masters did in their life when they were humans. They had to discover it for themselves. What is the self? What is the absolute reality? And then to continue to work at it until it became habit and then became their actual nature, that what they identify with. They don't identify with the little self. So when we see Maitreya the person, he doesn't identify with that, what's in front of us. He identifies totally with the self 100% of the time. That's why he's able to love the way that he loves. That's what gives him the wisdom that he has. That's why he doesn't get irritated by what anybody says about him or what anybody does to. And none of these masters do. They don't experience irritation in the way that we do. But they see life totally as the self, as the unshakable kingdom, as it's described in Hebrews 12:28. So kudos to you, girl. You definitely stumbled across a verse that I think is the gem of all gem of verses, really, because it's talking about the reality of the self. I think that's my interpretation of what it's saying. You might have a different interpretation, but I was quite moved by that comment. That's why I like people to comment, because it gets me to think about things, especially when I start to do some investigation on the comment like this one. So thank you. All right, moving on. Let's see. Let me stop the video for 1 second and find the comment. Here we go. This is coming from Michael Novak. Okay, now before I get going, I do want to say this, Michael. If you're listening, you put in your comment at the 31-36 minutes mark. And I think you've commented before, and you've put the minutes that, the comment at the time that I said it. And I have to say, man, I respect you immensely for listening that long, especially since you don't agree with what I say at all. I mean, for you to listen that long, I'm impressed, to be honest with you. I don't normally listen to videos that long on YouTube, especially ones that I'm not interested in or I don't agree with, right? But for you to have your view, disagree wholeheartedly with what I'm saying, and still go through that, I mean, I'm impressed. Like I said, I encourage everyone to do their own investigation. Not to, if you want to investigate more on what I'm saying based on the videos that I put up, that's fine too. But if you go to the Share International site, you'll probably get better background information there than you could from me. If you read some articles from Benjamin Creme's master, you'll definitely get more insights into the truth about who and what Maitreya is than I'll ever be able to say. But you're doing the work as far as I'm concerned. You know what I mean? I know you don't see it that way. I know you probably don't agree with me what I'm saying in that way. Maybe you're trying to expose something other than that. I don't know. But, at the end of the day, if it's not true for you, it's not true for you. You don't have to spend any time listening to my videos. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's gotten, anytime somebody listens to a video that I put up, if you just listen to the first little bit of it and perhaps go and check out something on Share International and never come back to my channel, I'm completely satisfied with it, because you've listened to even just a brief time about who and what Maitreya is from my perspective, and then he can enter your life without infringing your free will, as far as I'm concerned. But what did you have to say? And let's talk about it. because it's quite long. I'm not going to go into everything. I'm just going to talk about some of the highlights of your comment. Okay, so at the 31:36 minutes mark, the presenter speaks of Alice Bailey, a servant of Lucifer. I don't think he knows this. An interesting fun fact. I like that. All the masters, gods he speaks of, except Jesus, were created finite human beings, created only by Jesus, whom was always God and Creator, before ever taking on a human nature as our Redeemer. He himself is the Alpha and the Omega, and is appointed that all men die once only in this life, then the judgment. The choices we make in this life decide our eternity. Lucifer, the father of lies and the fallen angel of God, appears as an angel of light, aka ascended master, spirit guide, etc., etc., in order to deceive, falsely teaching that man can become a god. The 3 rules that Maitreya teaches listed here: honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. If we take the presenter's examples, he is basically saying we are sincere in our spirit when we do what we like. Lucifer teaches, do as thou please shall be the entirety of the law. This is the essence. Self-love, falsely teaching, we learn to become our own God through multiple lives, suggesting we can freely make God whatever we want him to be. Hence, make our own truth, not unlike history becoming history or her story. Honesty and selfishness are opposed and work against each other. Detachment is brought about by self-love and sacrifice. Sharing does emulate out of love, but love that is based in truth, that originates from its founder and creator, Jesus God. This reality is all these alleged masters of different religions are all man-made, and are a perversion of our Catholic God and creator's doctrine and laws. And I'm going to stop there. Again, thank you very much for the comment. Now, I wanted to touch on a few things here, because you've talked about a few things. Now, since you brought up interesting fun facts, here's an interesting fun fact, because it sounds like you're Catholic. Okay, now, I don't personally take this belief, but I know people that do. Okay, most Protestants that are hardcore Protestants, especially evangelical Christians, do not view Catholics as real Christians, surprisingly. And I was surprised to hear this, right? Because like, what are you talking about? They're of course Christians. No. They're Catholics. We're Christian. We're the real Christians. They got it wrong, right? You could say that the Baptist church that I have attended, First Baptist Church of Atlanta, has got it wrong because they celebrate the Sabbath, the day the Lord hath made, on Sunday, not Saturday, which is supposed to be what the Sabbath is, right? But that can't be the day of the Sabbath, because you know why? That's when SEC football is played in the fall, right? So why would you have the Sabbath on Saturday? Because that, like I said, that's when you're watching football, right? So they celebrate it on a different day, which you would say probably is a sin, right? You're not celebrating Sabbath on the real Sabbath day, right? It's just ideology differences, right? Ideology is what creates confusion. I do think that both Catholicism and the Baptists and Protestants are trying to explain the truth as they see it, but where they get it wrong is they hold on to it so much that they can't see anybody else's view, and therefore think the other person is wrong. Now, if you look at this, the way the churches have been over the last 2,000 years, starting with the Catholic Church and then moving on to the other ones, they have left nothing but a trail of disaster, misery, pain, fear, confusion, bigotry, hatred. I mean, all the biggies are all stemming from the fact that these people believe that they got it right and everybody else has got it wrong, right? And that's the real problem. And what did Jesus say in the Bible? A tree is known by its fruit. Simple. Couldn't be simpler, right? A tree is known by its fruit. People can say whatever they want to say about the churches, but at the end of the day, the fruit of that tree is nothing but bitterness and the wrong thing to look at. I do think there are people within the church that are well-meaning people. I'm not saying that, I'm not ruling that out, and I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I also think there are people who the church has changed their life, but it's not the church itself, it's the person that's changed their own life. Perhaps their view has changed. They were atheist and now they believe in a God, and that's changed their view, and they don't harm people as much. I don't know. It could be any, and there's millions of examples of this, right? But the church in and of itself has been a disaster, is really what it amounts to, you know? Just as governments around the world have been a disaster. The peoples of those countries aren't the problem. It's the governments. The peoples of the churches aren't the problem. It's the church people, right, that are the real problem, because they are expecting people to believe in what they're saying. At the beginning of every one of these videos, I always encourage you to do what? To investigate this on your own. Never once heard a pastor or a priest or a minister in a church say, you know what, don't take my word for it. You do your own investigation. You come up with what you got. They never say that. They say, believe me. Or if they're not saying that literally, they are implying it. To believe them. Because that's what gives them their power. You know, the churches that I've gone to have always encouraged people to give to the church. Give their money, 10%, whatever. You can do that if you want. But I've noticed that churches have a lot of money, and they spend a lot of that money on themselves. They don't spend it on I mean, some of them do, right? But for the most part, especially churches like the Catholic Church over the centuries, have gotten extremely wealthy based on people worshiping the church, not so much worshiping Jesus. They're worshiping the church. They're giving the devotion to the church. And that's the problem. Now, you said some other things in here too that I wanted to talk about, but that was the first thing I wanted to really talk about. Now, the word Lucifer, okay, so this is the other thing I want to talk about. It literally means bringer of light or light bearer. And it's Latin. That's all it means. It does not mean what most Christians make it out to mean. And from what I heard, it's a word that changed meaning not too long ago. So at the time that people like Helena Blavatsky were using the term Lucifer, it was understood for what it really meant. And then it changed at some point and got a new meaning. So if you read a book that was written in 1875, when she was talking about Lucifer, she was talking about it with the intention of something totally different than what most people think of it today. See, she's talking about devil worship. She wasn't talking about that. She was talking about Lucifer in terms of what it truly meant, which is a bringer of light. Same thing with Alice Bailey. She wasn't a student of Lucifer. She was a student of the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, which Jesus was a student of the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, to be honest. So was the Buddha. So was Muhammad. They were all a part of the same students of the same truth, perhaps explaining it differently, but they were all explaining the same truth, because that's why there's truths in all the religions. There's truths in the Ageless Wisdom Teachings that reference the Bible and the truth in the Bible and so forth. But even when she was talking about Lucifer and named her organization Lucifer Trust, she wasn't saying it's Satan's trust. She was saying the Lightbringer's Trust. And then she had to change the name because the vernacular had started to change. People started to accuse her of being a Satan worshiper. But words change meaning over time. And I know that there are words that we have used, even in my lifetime, that have a different meaning today and a different connotation and create a different emotional reaction to the listener than words that were when they were used just 25, 30, 40, 50 years ago. This is one of them. So it's in essence, that's the meaning of it now is Satan, but that's not what they were talking about. And I know that's not what they were talking about when they wrote it in the Bible in that way, but it's how it's interpreted today. So that's the meaning of the word, right? But like again, this is just a different take on it. You can take for what it is, but she's not a Satan worshiper by any stretch. You know, she was trying to teach the truth as she saw it, you know, and she put out many books with a lot of different truths in them. Now, the other thing where you said, let's get into this one. It comes from Paul. You said something about, where is it? The fallen angel can appear as an angel of light, aka ascended master, spirit guides, etc. 2,000 years ago or so, when Paul wrote that down, I think, and this is just a different take on it, you can say whatever you want to say, but my take on what he said, and it's no more or less valid than what you're thinking, but it's just a different view of it, is he was trying to talk to people that did not understand psychology, did not understand, and perhaps didn't even have a word for the word mind like it is today, or the word intention like it is today. And so when he was speaking to those people who were highly uneducated and not very world wise and those kind of things, didn't know much about themselves. The way that he could explain what he was trying to say to them was, even Satan can disguise himself as an angel of light. If Paul was alive today, talking to a much more educated audience today, he might say it differently. He might say, hey, look at your intentions. Your intention might not be quite as pure and selfless as you think. And we can see this all throughout other people's lives. It's harder to see it within ourselves, but we're all guilty of doing this to some degree. Now, how many times have you heard of someone who sees their ambition in life to be successful, to be rich, and then by them becoming rich, they will then give all that blessing to other people, right? Or for instance, right? This is just a for instance. Is that the highest form of selfless love that they could provide for the world? Or is it selfish in nature? I don't know. But if it's selfish, they're going to keep the money. They're going to say, I can't give that much as I was thinking, I'll just give a little bit, or I won't give any right now, or I can't afford that right now. But yet they were thinking that by getting that new career, that new job, they'll be able to praise God in a different way. And I'm being a little hyperbolic about it, but people do talk like this sometimes. People like to climb the social ladder, the political ladder, the ladder in a church, and become more influential in their church because they think God is leading them to that. Is it really God leading to that, or is it more of a selfish intention? And if it's selfish, just like the myth about and this parable about Midas, that everything that he touched turned to gold and eventually turned to dust, which is talking about the same thing. When you are selfish, yes, for a time it could look like gold, but eventually it turns to dust. It falls away. It doesn't really have any weight to it or any longevity, of real longevity. If it's done with selfless intention, done with love, well, then it's more permanent. It lasts longer. That's why you look at the words of Jesus, and we still talk about the words of Jesus today, because what he said was not of a selfish intention. It was of selfless intention. And then when you look at what the early churches did and how they took out information that was true about Jesus, what he had said, some of the truth about reincarnation in that way, which we're going to talk about in just a second, because you said something about it being a lie, right? It's not in the Bible, right? It must be a lie. They took all that out with the intention that it was good, when in actuality it was probably a selfish intention, because the only reason why they would take something like that out of the Bible originally is because it gave their power away back to the people. People would not worship the church in the way that they did if they thought they had more chances to get it right through reincarnation. If they really believed in reincarnation, they don't need a church. Eventually I'll get it. I don't need to come to you. I got it. I got this, right? Don't stress. We got this, right? Well, the only way to swing that power back to you is to take all that information out, all that truth about reincarnation out, and say that you only have one chance to get it right. The only way to get it right is to come to church every week. The only way to get it right is to give us 10% of your money. We will tell you what the Bible really means. We know the answers. We know the inner intentions of Jesus and these disciples and what they really meant. You come to us, and in so doing, you're kind of worshiping them and not so much what I think Jesus was trying to teach humanity. I don't think there's any reason why Jesus would come into the world, even if what I believe Jesus to be is incorrect. But why would he come to teach us how to live and how to love one another and teach us that if we didn't have the capability of being able to accomplish it at some point? What's the point? Just to show how much he loves and that we will never be like that? No. I mean, even Jesus himself said, greater things than this shall you do yourself. Couldn't be simpler. But I've never heard a minister or a pastor or a priest in a church use that phrase, because it takes all their power away. Now, in terms of reincarnation, it's in the Bible still, unfortunately not with not as much detail as was originally. But the one thing that comes to mind is the one verse where Peter turns to Jesus and says, "Who was John the Baptist?" And Jesus said very casually, like they had had this conversation many times, "Don't you remember what I said? He's Elijah come back again." And what the masters have said, what Ben's master had said, is that John the Baptist, or the prophet Elijah, was a previous incarnation of John the Baptist, just as Jesus had said it in the Bible. But he said it very casually. If we were eavesdropping on the conversation and you knew anything about reincarnation, you would understand that that's what he was talking about. He was talking about reincarnation, right? Who was John the Baptist? Don't you remember what I said? He's Elijah come back again. Oh, I forgot. Or whatever, right? But it's in there. And there's other instances and references to reincarnation, not very many, not as many as was originally intended to be in there. Perhaps it would make more sense if there were others in there. Even the law of cause and effect isn't really spoken about in church. It's all about the 10 Commandments, following the 10 Commandments, which don't really, I think, do anybody any good. It's better to understand that when you harm someone, that you get harm back to you. Those who live by the sword shall die by the sword. You reap what you sow, right? That's much more impactful, I think, than trying to memorize 10 Commandments and trying to live like that. It just does, to me, it doesn't work, right? There were other instances in the Bible that were taken out where Jesus was talking about the law of cause and effect in greater detail. One of them is in the Dead Sea Scrolls, where he was talking with Peter and the disciples about a man that was walking by in the morning time toward the town. And he said to Peter that man, before the sun goes down today, he will be dead based on his karma. He talked about this. And this is an important fact about karma, because it can be changed and mitigated based on what you do and how you change your attitude, right? But what happened was he told Peter and the disciples that he was going to die based on his karma that day before the sun came down. Then the sun had gone down. They hadn't moved yet, and this guy was walking back the other way, right? Peter goes, "Hey, isn't that the guy that you said was going to," he didn't say it like this, but, if he was alive today, he would say, "Hey, man, isn't that the guy that you said that, hey, boss, isn't that the guy that you said was going to be dead by the time the sun goes down? He's still alive. What happened?" Well, Jesus said that on the way to the town, he saw a man that was dying of thirst and stopped and gave him his water. And in so doing, mitigated his karma. And that's what saved him from what was about to happen. And he told his disciples to go down there, open up the bundle of sticks on this person's back. And they did, and they found a poisonous serpent that could have bit him. But what saved him was he cared enough about somebody else that he actually gave them water that saved their life. That in turn saved him. Benjamin Crème talks about this all the time. The fastest way to burn off your karma is to serve humanity in some way. Service is the fire that burns up karma, right? So we all have karma. We all have done things that have harmed other people that we have to eventually balance out. And if you serve, well, you are burning up that karma at an extraordinary rate. And this person in this instance where Jesus was talking about it is a good example of, helping someone, perhaps mitigating your karma. Now, if you do it with the intention of mitigating your karma, it might not have the same effect. Again, even Satan can disguise himself as an angel of light. Even your selfish nature can be disguised as something selfless. But if you do it selflessly, yeah, it could happen like that. Sure, of course, right? So the belief that we have only one life and then we are judged in the way that we do, it's sad that this is what Ben's master said. Sad as it is that this view of the Christ has so permeated human consciousness. He goes, no such being exists. There is no being that is to judge us in the way that Christians believe him to judge us. Maitreya says that religion is just religion. It's just a structure. You can experience the self, that unshakable kingdom that's in 1228 that I think that they were talking about. You can experience that in religion, but you have to practice those three things. They're not rules, they're practices: honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. And when someone is sincere in spirit, it doesn't mean they get to do whatever they want, whenever they want, with impunity. That's not what that means. That is definitely misinterpretation of what he's trying to say. And the times that I've spoken about it, that wasn't what I was talking about either. So Maitreya says that sincerity of spirit is like when you're sitting on a beach You drove all the way to, on vacation to this beach, right? You're sitting on a beach. The sun is going down. You hear the wind, you hear the waves, and at that moment you forget all about your everyday life, your job, your boss that's on your back about something, your money problems, whatever. You forget about it and you're just there in the moment. That's sincerity of spirit. It's not like you're running around like a crazy person with no clothes on screaming at people, right? Because you can do whatever the heck you want to do at that moment, right? That's not it. It's you are experiencing that moment for what it is. Now, the other thing that I've said is, you can experience this also when you're being creative and you lose all track of time. The master painter Rembrandt once said, work is a substitution for time. And when you're work and you're focused on your work, you forget all about time. And the next thing you know is, whoop, the whole day's gone by. That's sincerity of spirit. You're still there. You haven't died. You haven't changed personalities. You're just focused on that moment and not so much about the not self, right? The problems that we have, the identifications that we're identifying with incorrectly and those kind of things. And if you're not creative artistically, don't worry. You can still experience sincerity of spirit by just listening to music that you love and forgetting about those things that cause you issues, right? Or looking at a painting and standing in front of it in a museum perhaps or whatever, right? But he also talked about it in terms of conversation. And this is what I want to leave our conversation with about sincerity of spirit. Maitreya says it's like having a heart-to-heart conversation with someone. So where did you get that it means that you can do whatever you want whenever you want? And that's the law. Do us what you will, right? That's not what it means at all. It's having a heart-to-heart conversation with somebody. But here's what happens when we have conversations with people, okay? We compare and contrast ourselves with them for the most part. We're talking to a neighbor or a friend who's putting on airs and presenting themselves that everything in their life is perfect, right? We do this on social media even, right? And then we start to compare and contrast ourselves with them. Well, Sally's kids are much more respectful than my kids are. We don't know how Sally's kids really are when they close the door. They might be screaming at, I don't know. But they present themselves like everything's great, fine and wonderful, right? Well, Jill has a much better marriage than I do. They seem to be much more in love, or so-and-so's better looking than me, or, they have a better job and are making more money. Oh, wow, they're going on vacation to Maui again? I can't even afford to go to Florida. They must be better than me, or vice versa. You're the Sally that has a, better marriage than so-and-so, or you're having a conversation with somebody who's clearly doesn't have as much money as you, and you start to think, ooh, I got a lot more money than them, right? Maybe I'm a little bit better than them. Or they don't know what they're doing on their job. They clearly are not as good at their job as I am, right? We all do this. And when we do that, we are step out of the sincerity of spirit portion of the conversation, and we're just kind of talking at each other, comparing and contrasting. And when you are having a heart-to-heart conversation with someone and you experience sincerity of spirit, guess what happens? Your compare and contrast between you and them and you goes right out the window. And you're just there in the moment, either listening to them or speaking to them in a way, and they're listening to you with that type of listening. The times that I've seen Maitreya in my life, he was a familiar. It's not how he really looks in London, but it's him. He's speaking to me. A little bit of his consciousness is speaking to me. And the times that I've seen him, and I spoke to him for about an hour. We had a conversation for about an hour one time, years and years ago. At no point in that conversation, and I knew he was Maitreya at the time that I was speaking to him, because he was saying things to me that only somebody that could be reading my mind at that time could be saying, right? And at no point did I ever feel inferior to him. At no point did he ever make me feel inferior. The times that I started to speak, he allowed me to speak. He gave me the freedom to be whoever what I was. And he might not have agreed with everything that I said, because he never said, I agree with everything that you said, right? That must be love, to agree with what everybody says. He didn't agree or disagree. He just listened. He was there in the moment as sincerity of spirit, just as Maitreya had described it once as being. And when we see these masters in our lives, in the world, when they're out known for who they are, they'll be the perfect examples of honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. The things that they say and they do, they won't have any ulterior motive to doing. They will be saying it out of heartfelt truth. Not in order to get you to give them money or to trick you into something, they will say this because it is true. When they are trying to help you, they're being sincere in their help. They're not doing it because they want anything in return. So, but when we talk to Maitreya, even though he'll be known by the whole world and looked up to by the whole world, he'll still give his attention to one person when he's talking to him. And you'll feel like you're the only person in the world because he'll be listening totally to you, one-on-one, right? When he speaks to the whole world through our media, it will be like he's speaking to each one of us individually, because we'll feel him, what he's saying in our own heart, because he has mastered what it means to be sincere in spirit. It doesn't mean he gets to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, but the freedom that will come from self-realization is something that we will all be able to experience. But doesn't mean that we get to do whatever we want whenever we want. It just means we will be free from our own fear, from our own conditioning, from our own unreality of wrong identifications and those kind of things. Hopefully that adds a little bit to it. I love you guys. Thank you very much for your comments and your questions. Miss Cynthia, if you're listening to this, you had a question that I didn't get a chance to answer. The video is getting way too long. I'll try to answer it in the next video. I love you guys, and I look forward to putting up a video real soon. Take care. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.